Hey, good morning. It's 9:30. Go ahead and get going here with our handicap committee seminar for the day. Um, Thanks all for joining. My name is Jim Douglas, Director of Handicapping here at Carolinas Golf Association. Um, for those who haven't sat in one of my seminars before, that's me. Um, our department team here, our department Director of Member Services is Kevin Harris. Kevin's actually sitting in on the seminar this morning. Kevin's a former PGA professional at former club pro. He brings that knowledge to our benefit here, and as well as he's much more familiar with the Golf Genius product than I am. So he'll be sitting in and chiming in if needed and answering questions as needed. Again, my name's Jim Douglas, Director of Handicapping. For those that don't know, and maybe familiar with Doug Hardesty, who was on our team for quite a few years, he has retired. We've hired a new associate, Anna Catherine Herring. So if you're calling our our GIN support or member services support, you'll get any one of the three of us. Today, I'm just going to talk about mostly the items in the rules of handicapping that kind of pertain to tournaments and kind of discuss some of those things, as well as some other things around Golf Genius and some other facets here and there. Hopefully, everyone will get some use out of this one. So, if you have any questions, you can use the chat, or it's usually fine. We don't have a big group this morning. You can unmute yourself and ask away. So, with that, let's just get going here. All right. So we have the committee in charge of the competition, which is just that, the committee that's in charge of the event, the tournament, the competition. They may set entry and eligibility conditions within their terms of competition for that event. For example, set a maximum handicap limit for entry. Set a maximum course handicap and set a maximum playing handicap. As we'll learn, the committee in charge of a competition really kind of has not necessarily free reign, but pretty much can do what they want to do with how they want to run the particular event. And of course, they reserve the right to adjust the playing handicap of a player before or between rounds of a competition. And we'll talk a little more about that later as well. That specific thing with between rounds and prior to a competition. What else does a committee in charge of the competition have to do here? Determine the handicap index to be used for the competition. It's recommended to use the handicap index that's in the effect of the date as close to the start of the competition as possible. You want to have the handicap indexes be the best representation of their ability as possible. But of course, you have to have consideration to the preparation that you have to go through to get the tournament ready, printing scorecards, so on and so forth. If you have a season-long kind of competitions played across multiple weeks in a season, such as a season-long match play or some sort of league event over several weeks, it's recommended to use the player's handicap index on the date of that individual match to use to calculate the golfer's playing handicap index. For a season-long one, you don't want to use the handicap index at the start of the season throughout. Temporary course and slope ratings. Not sure if that would apply too often, but once in a while it may. So if you have a need, is there a need to use a special combination of tees for a one-time event? So a special combination of tees that's outside the normal course layout that you would have. So what do you do in that particular case? Because we need to have a course and slope rating. So the competition committee does have the discretion to set the tees to be used for an event. And a course and slope rating must be available so we can post acceptable scores for handicap purposes back to golfer records after the event or after each round of the event. So the committee can use Appendix G, that's right in the back of our rules of handicapping, to determine a temporary course rating and slope rating without AGA involvement, AGA being Allied Golf Association, which is us, the CGA. Well, the way Appendix G works is you'll calculate the yardage of the tees that you have laid out and find the closest tee that has a course and slope rating in your for your course. And then the chart says, okay, it looks at that difference in yardage, and there's a manual adjustment you can apply to either add or subtract from that nearest course and slope rating to get a temporary course and slope rating. And that's fine to use. You don't have to consult with me, but you would certainly be welcome to consult with us if you wanted any guidance on a temporary course and slope rating. And then finally, of course, this procedure using this Appendix G is not a substitute for a formal course rating and slope rating. So if you have a special combination or a different combination of tees that you've put into play on a longer term than just a single event, then please do request from us here at the CGA for us to get an official set of ratings for that course and tee. All right, moving on. Playing handicap calculation. So playing handicap is obviously the handicap used for the strokes that one's golfer receives for the tournament. Course handicap is you against the course. Playing handicap is you against the field. So let's just go over the playing handicap calculation real quick, which comes from Rules of Handicapping 6.2a. So the playing handicap calculation determines the number of strokes each player gives or receives, enables equity among players of all handicap levels within the different formats of the game. If you have a format of play where a handicap allowance of 100% is adopted, the playing handicap will be the same as the course handicap. But often it's a little bit different. And we'll talk about handicap allowances a little later on. A few slides later, we're going to talk a little more about specifics of handicap allowances. Anyway, just to go over the calculation, and start with the unrounded course handicap. This was a change from just a few years ago, where we use the unrounded course handicap, not the rounded course handicap, to determine the playing handicap. I think everybody's familiar with that by now. We're taking that unrounded course handicap, multiplying it by the handicap allowance to give us our playing handicap. Example, 4-ball stroke play that uses 85% of a course handicap. Player may have a course handicap that's rounded off to 15, but a playing handicap of 13 that was computed using the unrounded course handicap. So let's say probably 14.7 or something like that. Would round up to a course handicap of 15 and may give us a 13 playing handicap with the handicap allowance. Jumping into flights, we often get questions on creating flights. That's one of the goals of this discussion here, is to kind of cover some things that we get questions about here and there. So how do you want to create flights? How you create flights is based on your goals of flighting. Do you want to flight them by age? Do you want to flight them by what tee they play? Any kind of factor that you want to use, that should be your goal. That's how you flight would be based on what your goals are for that. But to get to the point here of if the committee wishes to have players of similar abilities in the same flight, they may wish to determine flight distribution based on the handicap index rather than the course handicap, which is dependent on the tees played. Flighting by playing handicap, course handicap, playing handicap, reduces the number of strokes within matches or between players in the flight, but does not put golfers of similar abilities in the same flights. And so that option is discouraged. This is from the USGA Rules of Handicapping as well, and the CGA follows that recommendation. If you're trying to get players of similar abilities together, use the handicap index. But there are cases where people like to use the playing handicap, not against the rules or anything like that, but not our recommendation. Multi-round events, mentioned that briefly earlier. So when you are conducting a multi-round competition over consecutive days, member, guest, member, what have you, It's recommended that the handicap index used at the start of the competition is used for all the rounds. So if you got an event over Friday, Saturday, Sunday, use that handicap index that you used at the start of the competition, use that for all the rounds. But the committee may adjust the playing handicap before or between rounds of a competition, even if the committee does not use the updated handicap index each day. So if you have a member guest event and you have a guest that shot well below what you think he should have shot based on his handicap index, you can adjust that golfer's playing handicap index going forward for that event. And this concept of adjusting playing handicaps between rounds can even applies to events where excuse me, where there's multiple rounds on the same day. So your 9-hole round robin events where you're playing a match in the morning and a match in the afternoon, that playing handicap can be adjusted between morning and afternoon. Other considerations. Often golfers or committees in charge of the competition like to sometimes use the low handicap index rather than the actual handicap index for their competition. And that's fine. That's an acceptable thing to do. And we can see that low handicap index here in the golfer's record in the admin portal. But we often get questions around this. In Golf Genius, the Golf Genius software has several methods to update handicap indexes for an event. And we can see them here. Current handicap index, the handicap index on a specific date, our World Handicap System low handicap index that we see in the golfer's scoring record. But they also have some extra ones, lowest handicap index over 3 months, lowest handicap index over 6 months, 12 months, lowest handicap index over a specific date range even. Sometimes we get a question of these, because these two options sound very similar, the WHS low handicap index and the lowest handicap index over 12 months. Often those values are going to be the same, but they can be different, and that does happen. How does this happen? Well, there's a couple different things. For one, the low handicap index isn't established until a golfer has a full set of 20 scores. So that could be the case where the golfer is going to have a lowest handicap index over 12 months, but the low handicap index has not been established. That's a case there. The other case is that the low handicap index doesn't update nightly. It's not revised nightly. It's only revised when golfers supposed to score. So the low handicap index is dependent on the date of the most recent score. So it potentially can be a little bit older than a year, old, or even a month or two older than or outside of. I mean, it could be 14 months old rather than inside that 12 months. So in that case, those values could be different as well. Which value you want to use as the committee in charge, certainly up to you there. But that can be the difference. There can be a difference there. Yep, and as mentioned, there's other options to update using the 6 months lowest handicap index. I've talked to some clubs, talked to a committee chair the other day they were looking at using handling. They had concerns about some of the guests coming in for whatever reason, and using different playing handicaps for the guests and their member guests, such as using a greater allowance, a greater handicap allowance on guests, or using the guest low handicap index. All things that can be done as a committee in charge of the competition. Par 3 tournaments, these seem to be becoming a little more and more popular, especially as clubs start adding shorter tees out there. We often get questions on how to set up a par 3 tournament and how to get that going and have it accurately handicap. So the first thing that needs to be done is to create a custom tee in the course details in Golf Genius. So here's a look at your course details, kind of a section of the course details screen, and you'll want to just click the Add Tee. Add your course, add that tee details, name of the tee, give it all the yardages that you have. Try to get a good set of yardages for that event. Um, One thing people have often overlooked is that they need to come up with an accurate course and at least a pretty close approximation for a course and slope rating for a par three tournament rather than I've had some clubs that were trying to use their full, a 70.1, 132 rating and slope for the event, and that's not going to give them very good, very accurate course handicaps and playing handicaps for a par three event. So come up with a good approximation for your course and slope rating. It's going to come out once the yardages get that low for a par three. They all kind of come pretty close together. It probably will work pretty well for your par three tournament. So I'll usually suggest a number is something like 51.0 for and 75 for men, and maybe 54.0 and 77 for ladies. You're certainly welcome to reach out to me, and I can find and help you tweak a good rating and slope for your par three tournament. That's not a problem at all. And posting scores back, which normally we ask that you post scores back for your competitions. Would you do that for a par three event with a temporary course and slope rating like this? Most likely not. There could be a rare case. Maybe you have the par three and you have a tee set that's close enough, a short tee set, a family tee set or something like that that's close enough that we could go off of. But most likely not, we're not going to count those scores toward the handicapping record. And of course, apply your handicap allowance as you see fit to tweak the course handicaps and playing handicaps for that event. And then, yes. All right. Speaking of handicap allowances, which I mentioned earlier, so what are handicap allowances? Handicap allowances are designed to provide equity in different formats of play over both 9 and 18 holes. Handicap allowances are applied to the unrounded course handicap as the final step in calculating a player's handicap. And if you're curious more about that, it's covered in rules 6.1 and 6.2. The changes they made a few years ago, it was essentially to have the rounding be at the final step. There used to be double rounding in there, and they wanted to do things a little more accurate. So we're having just one rounding step at the very end. There's some examples. I'm going to show some screenshots of the recommended handicap allowances that come straight from the rules of handicapping. One thing I didn't note on the slide, and I stumbled upon, these recommended handicap allowances, what their baseline from when the USGA is running the numbers to figure these out. For stroke play events, it gives everybody a chance to get their target was to get everybody to have the chance to get within the top 10% of the field. And then for match play events, give every player the equal chance to win. So let's look at some recommended handicap allowances. Individual event is actually 95%. There's an asterisk here, which we talked about in our World Handicapping System seminars last year. I'll touch on that here in a second. Basically, there's some flexibility that's encouraged with individual stroke play events based on the size of the field and the makeup of the field. But really, that can apply to anything, any of these events, other events as well, but especially for the individual stroke play. And again, these are easily findable in the rules of handicapping. And again, of course, these are recommendations. If you feel something else should be used, that's certainly fine. I will say, I mentioned 4-ball match play. The recommendation is 90%. For our CGA interclub events, we use 85%. But that's more of it is match play, but it's also a points event. So all holes are being played. Because as we'll see on the next page, our format of play, recommended handicap allowance for 4-ball stroke play. Where is it? Here, best 2 of 4, or I'm sorry. Oh, 4. Where is it? 85%. Yeah. Anyway, we go 85% for that CGA interclub because we're playing full 18 holes. I'll just mention some of these I'll talk about these formats just because I was curious about them as well. The par bogey format is where you win and lose holes as you would in match play, but you're comparing the number of strokes taken for a hole against the fixed target score. So your target score may be pars, and your how many times did you get par and not get par? So you're kind of comparing things like that. Um, Foursomes is alternate shot, straight alternate shot. Greensomes is alternate shot, but selected drives. Um, and the Pinehurst Chapman format looks pretty interesting. It's both players tee off, and then the players on the two-person team swap their tee shot, swap their positions, and so player A is playing player B's tee shot, player B is playing player A's tee shot. So they both play the second shot, and then they take the best one from there, and then play alternate shot on the way in. Um, Those recommended handicap allowances don't cover every single format. So there are some formats that aren't covered, where the recommendations are not covered in the rules of handicapping. But you can always use the recommendations as a guidance. So find the format of play that's kind of most similar to the event you're running, the tournament you're running, and then adjust upwards or downwards as needed. So for example, a popular one is the Texas Scrambles. There's no USGA recommendation for a Texas Scramble. It's essentially a best ball event using selected drives. So a good idea is if you're using selected drives, just to subtract an extra 10% to account for those selected drives. So for example, if you have a Texas Scramble, two best balls of four, the recommendation for a two best ball of four event is 85%. Adjust that down to 75% to cover selected drives. You may want to go to 70% though, depending on your field. So yeah, like I said, depending on the field. So field size and field makeup do have an impact on equity and can be taken into consideration when determining handicap allowances for a specific event, especially in stroke play formats. Um, this was talked about last year during our seminars last year. The recommended handicap allowance is 95% for all individual stroke play formats, and it's based on medium-sized field net events. And they say medium size is between 30 and 100. To me, that's a broad range, but uh, that's what we're working with. But if you have a small field size, less than 30 players, a handicap allowance of 100% could be considered. Or if you have your net event flighted and you've got less than 30 players in a flight and you're having individual winners for each flight, certainly want to not use the 95% recommendation, bump that up to 100%. But on the other hand, if you have maybe a large field or a lot of higher handicap players in the field, a lower allowance could be considered. For example, 90% instead of 95%. Can you apply this kind of concept to the other formats? You could. You can certainly think about the field and the size of the field and the makeup of the field and determining your final handicap allowances. All right. One of the other changes last year that had us have lots of where we had lots of questions and confusion last year was a change in how playing handicaps are computed for four-ball match play events. So in general, after handicap allowances have been applied in match play formats, the player with the lowest playing handicap plays off 0 strokes relative to the other players. The other players receive the difference in their own playing handicap and that of the other player with the lowest playing handicap. So the way it used to work is we would take that final, each individual player would get a playing handicap, and then we'd stroke off the low ball from there. But to avoid that multiple rounding, they moved that step into an intermediate step. And that's this step here where we're going to take the unrounded course handicaps, and those unrounded course handicaps, the lowest unrounded course handicap, which happens to be a plus 1.1336 in this example, that person is going to play to a 0. And everyone else will be adjusted less that golfers, less the player A's golfer. So in this case, they're getting added 1.136 to each of their unrounded course handicaps, then taking our handicap allowance of 90% in this example to that, and then rounding that off. Caused a lot of confusion, especially on the Golf Genius side. the scorecards would always print the playing handicap as well as the strokes that they were getting, and sometimes those numbers could be different. We always recommend turning in for 4-ball match play, turning off that display of the playing handicap to avoid any confusion like that. I know players like to see what they're getting and see the difference, but turning off that playing handicap is a better way to go. And I'll show you another example. We'll do a screenshot here from the handicap analysis tool in Golf Genius, which is always pretty handy. It's a very useful tool in Golf Genius to view how playing handicaps are getting computed. So you can see the specifics, see if you're making any mistakes in there. So this is a 4-ball match play, but I just have 2 players that are showing here just to get to show the example. So Jason here is going to be our A player. He's got the lowest unrounded course handicap here of 3.464. So he's going to play to a 0. That part's missing from the screenshot, but he's going to play to a 0. But the other players are going to be affected downward by player A's unrounded course handicap. So example we have, and then one of the other competitors in the foursome is Greg Kelly here. His unrounded course handicap is 10.014. So we're going to subtract that 3.464 from there. I'm sorry. His unrounded course handicap is 13.478. We're going to subtract that 3.464 from that 13, his regular unrounded course handicap, 13.478. That gets us his next in the adjusted unrounded course handicap down to 10.014. Taking 90% of that number gives him a playing handicap of 9. There's how that works. Shows the step here of the unrounded course handicap adjusting the A player getting adjusted the rest of the foursome. All right, moving along just fine here. Playoffs. The important thing with playoffs is to make sure that you have defined in the terms and conditions of your tournament of how the ties are going to be handled for the event. You don't want to decide how you're going to do the playoffs while the event's going on or after the event or after the round is over. You want to include such details as, when is that playoff going to be held? Is it going to be, if it will start at a specific time, as soon as possible after the last group finishes, a later date, what have you. What holes will be used for the playoff? Are you going to start at 1 and go forward from there? Are there some other holes that make a little more sense for the way your course is laid out? Which holes are going to be used? The number of holes on which the playoff will be used. Stroke player for match play events, it's pretty much a sudden death kind of playoff. But for stroke play events, maybe you want to have a 3-hole playoff, something like that, or maybe 4 holes if that works better for your course's layout. For net stroke play playoffs, the number of holes played should be used to determine the number of strokes to be deducted. For example, if you're playing 3 holes, you'd want to use that's a 3 divided by it's 1/6 of the golfer's handicap index or golfer's playing handicap. You want to use a percentage of that golfer's full playing handicap to get the number of strokes to deduct from their total gross strokes for those holes played in the playoff. For net match play playoffs, it's important to determine beforehand where handicap strokes should be applied, especially if you're doing a net match play playoff and you're not starting, depending on where you're starting, you want to determine where your strokes, especially if you're not starting on number 1 and going forward, if you're starting on number 18 or 16 or something like that, determine where strokes should be applied. Again, set that all up beforehand. And as you may have seen in the Golf Genius product, well, I've talked about playoffs here, but there's lots of options if a playoff's not feasible for matching cards to determine your winner. And I think there's over 20 matching scorecard matching tiebreakers that are in here in the Golf Genius software, all just a little bit different. I'm not going to go into details on every one of them. There's a nice section in the Golf Genius help document that covers how each one of these works. The USGA method is the one we usually will recommend. comparing the last 9 holes, then the last 6, then the last 3, and then the last 1 hole. Yeah, some of these apply differently to net events rather than stroke events, but um, lots of stroke play matching scorecard options for determining your playoff winners or determining your winner without using a playoff. Um, Fairly new question, especially with so many courses getting damaged this year with the fall storm. Um, is you've got holes out of play for maintenance. You know, some courses were down. One we've been working with recently has 4 holes that are under maintenance and need to be repaired. So it's going to be some time before they have a full 18. So, what do you do if you still want to run events over 14 holes, over 15 holes, 17 holes? Um, well, first thing you want to do is, and you certainly can run events over a smaller number of holes, but you want to lower the course handicaps and playing handicaps based on how many holes are out of play. So, for example, if you have 4 holes out of play, reduce the handicap or reduce playing handicaps by that percentage, 14 out of 18. 78%. You're going to use, and you can adjust that to 75% or something like that, or 80% to make it an even number. And this is on top of any handicap allowance that you would have for the format of play that you're running. If you want to reduce that playing handicap because you're not playing all 18 holes, golfers don't need all their strokes. For stroke play events, it's pretty simple. You're just total gross score, subtract your handicap, gives you your net score. But if you're playing a match play event or maybe competing, maybe you have a net skins component of your stroke play event, you may want to adjust those stroke index allocation, the handicap holes, to account for those holes that are now out of play. So you want to take any hole out of play, you would want to put at the highest stroke indexes. So if you have 4 holes out of play, you would make them 15, 16, 17, 18, make those the stroke allocations for those 4 holes so that golfers aren't getting on strokes on holes where they're not able to play. And you might want to also pay attention because Golf Genius is just going to work with 18 holes. To account for holes out of play when dotting the cards, you may need to manually adjust playing handicaps for golfers who should be getting more than 1 shot a hole. So let's say we're playing our 14 holes and a golfer's getting, let's say, 16 strokes. May want to adjust that by the number of holes that are out of play. So add 4 gives him a 20. That gives them, so the holes out of play are going to get dotted, but then it's going to circle back with our extra shots and double up on the 1 and 2 stroke index to give him his full 16 strokes that he gets. And again, we're here to assist as needed with those because they can get a little tricky to think about. All right, very good. Another item that often causes confusion raises questions, but it's still kind of a debatable topic. Are plus handicap players. So this is pulled from the rules of handicapping. This is Appendix C. When you're applying the handicap allowance, the reduction for plus handicap players, or the reduction for all golfers, results in a playing handicap getting closer to 0, and that includes players with a plus handicap index. So when we're using handicap allowances, we're trying to shrink the field. This is the way I like to look at it. We're shrinking the field. But if plus playing handicaps are getting pushed away from 0, then you're not really shrinking the field. But I know players or committees do sometimes feel differently about that, and committees can use their discretion with this. I know I had one that they didn't, for plus handicap players, they weren't doing the opposite of this, but they were just leaving them at their number that they had. They wouldn't get them close to 0. Very important, posting scores after your event or after each round of your event. So USGA and the CGA, we strongly encourage competition committees to post all scores. Not leave that to the golfers, let the golfers or have the system post the scores back for you. Also important, the committee should announce to the field that they are posting the scores to avoid a duplicate posting scenario. Happens quite a bit. I posted the score, didn't know that committee was going to post a score. The committee, preferably the handicap committee, in consultation with the competition committee, you must know beforehand and announce it beforehand whether that score is going to be indicated with a designated with the letter C for a competition score. Have that defined beforehand. And again, even if that same handicap index is used throughout the event, it is important for the committee to post scores at the end of each day, especially for things like that playing PCC, for the PCC playing conditions calculation. And finally, I get this question every once in a while as well. The player's full and unrestricted course handicap should, our USGA Rules of Handicapping Manual often has the word should in here. This is a should that's more on the must be used for my view, must be used in the calculation of the adjusted gross score based on the handicap index on the day of the competition was played. So for maximum whole score, we're using the course handicap, not the playing handicap that was used. And Golf Genius handles that by itself. That's a pretty good thing. All right, I've kind of reached the end here, but we're going to have open questions here in a second. I will remind you, I've got a couple more of these seminars that we're doing. One at the end of the month I'm really looking forward to is handicap reviews and modifying handicap indexes. I know a lot of people are not a handicap committee people, and pros are looking forward to this new handicap review tool, which is due to come out first or second week of April 7th, I think is that date, and we get to see it next week. So we're going to have a good seminar on handicap reviews. I'll have a seminar on stroke index allocations, always a favorite topic. Kind of cover the preferred lies and things kind of outside the rules of handicapping, mulligans and that sort of thing. Holes out of play, 9 holes closed. So our case there with a course is undergoing maintenance, how to handle that in terms of handicapping. And then I've got I'll do at least one more, probably more, the general overviews. So we have open questions and answers. And there's one in the chat. When playing a gross event using 3 different courses based on different tee boxes and course rating, do you recommend flights by handicap index, course handicap, or by course? Are they playing? Well, is it a single round event? The multiple rounds? You can go ahead and unmute and whoever asked the question.
There's single round events, and then sometimes it's a 2-round event. But either way, the question is being asked, how would you best plight this? I understand net score events. Typically, you would want to have a net score event based on handicap indexes too, because they're playing net scores. They're playing multiple tee boxes or multiple courses with different ratings, and you can use a handicap index. But when you're playing a gross score event, it seems to me that it's best by the course being played, so you have the gross tee winners according to the course. But that's
I'm looking closer. Yeah, gross. Yeah, for gross events, it's almost impossible. It's really impossible to have a gross event where players are playing even the same course in different tees, because they're just playing different course with different ratings of slope, just different courses. You can't really have a proper gross. I mean, you can, but you can't have an accurate gross event on when players are playing different courses if they're just playing, unless they're playing all 3 courses over 3 days. If they're playing a single course for one day, I would think you would want to flight them or divide them based on course.
But then when you want to get a net score, so who the net winners are, that could be reconstructed to the flights being by the handicap index or course handicap. And I'm not sure which one
I think,
Go ahead.
I think so. Kevin, do you want to chime in there for me on that one? Net event over 3 courses. Flighting by handicap index. Well, again, we always like to flight by handicap index. That gets your players of equal ability put together.
Yeah, in general, if you start with the concept of I'm on a flight based on handicap index or a net event, I think that'll always lead you down a path of competitions that are most equitable in terms of who the golfers are competing against. Just to circle back to the gross component of that question as well, I would include different tees in those flights as well. So, as Jim mentioned, it's not really equitable to have a gross competition across multiple courses if they're not playing those courses on another day. Same goes for different tee boxes. So you would want to include course and tee box in your flighting for the gross competition. And again, to summarize, for the net competition, again, if it's one day, I would still sort of include that. I would definitely include the course as part of the flighting. And then you can go and include handicap index as well.
So Kevin, let me clarify this because this is a big discussion point here. Basically one course, but again, 3 different tee boxes, which means that there's really 3 different courses with all the different slope ratings, etc., and being played. So flighting it for a gross score by the tee box, because that's the easiest thing to make a statement on, is what I understand. But then you just said tee box and course. So if you have a flight of players who's playing the same tee box, but now you've got 10 players and their handicap indexes are spread across 20 strokes. Now you're going to want to flight that, you're going to break that flight potentially up according to handicap index. Is that what I'm hearing?
Are we still talking gross or net?
Gross.
Yeah, you'll have to make that determination on your own in terms of how many players would constitute the minimum number for a flight and what's equitable.
Okay.
Yeah, right. That's not equitable for a 0 to play against a 20, right? I mean and that's where some of the comments that Jim made prior come up, where before you even open registration for an event, for all of our tournaments, there's a form that's called the terms of competitions, and you want to spell out as much as you can ahead of time so that anyone registering for an event understands these are the procedures that are used. Again, Jim mentioned it a lot. The tournament committee has a lot of leeway. So be upfront with what that is. That eliminates a lot of questions later on. The more you can detail ahead of time, the better. But again, to answer your question, yeah, you'll need to provide some sort of way to provide equity in that scenario you gave, or a gross competition with a range of 20 for a handicap index.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was a great question, and thanks, Kevin. Great answer. What else? I think we had somebody else asking a question.
I think Skip is asking a question, but he's on mute.
Okay, I'm on. Okay.
There you go.
For a net event, is it can you or should you use the new handicap review tool in GIN to reduce handicaps if so indicated before you start playing? Is that something that we should look at before the tournament starts? If we're having a tournament with 30 guys in it, let's say, and half of them, there's an indication by using the handicap review tool that most of their indexes, a lot of their indexes should be reduced by 1. It so states. Now that's Is that something we could consider, should use, or forget about it?
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly consider that. That's something an idea I've not thought of with that new tool, is using it before an event.
Yeah.
It's certainly, that's tools, certainly some guidance for you. And that tool simply just does,
Got it.
math.
Yeah.
It does,
Yeah.
it takes that golfer's handicap index and looks at their scores over the past year. Um, yeah, I mean, that's certainly something you can look at doing.
Okay, but it should be discretion. I mean, that's not something you have to do.
Oh, no, of course not. No. But yeah, like I said, we'll have updates on all that. Like I'm good to see the new tool. I think
Yeah,
next Wednesday.
it works pretty good. It works pretty good.
I know you've been waiting for it as well. So Skip, thanks.
I mean, it's there now. You can
All right. Oh,
you
yeah.
can click on it.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Skip.
I don't want to steal Jim's thunder too much on this one
Oh.
too, but
Go ahead.
there with is it with the next update? There'll be a requirement next year for clubs to actually run the handicap review on all of the golfers.
Yeah.
That'll be a requirement for clubs to stay authorized to issue handicap indexes. But Skip, to your question, the one thing I would recommend that you have this tool available to you now. It's probably a healthy procedure to run it before your bigger events, because participants will eventually come to know that this is available, whether it's at your club or another event, or sometimes you have guests come in. They'll understand that it exists, and I wouldn't try to avoid the situation where someone has a outstanding performance and then after the event you realize, wow, he or she may have been recommended for an adjustment, and the club just didn't look at it. So if you have a number of major events throughout the year, it might be a good procedure to run it. And today it's not very efficient because you have to go one by one. But with the update that's coming, you'll be able to run the entire club at once.
Yeah, I mean, with a small event, it's not. I mean, it takes 20 minutes.
Yeah, right.
Or
So
less.
again, yeah, I think the more that people become aware that the tool is there, I think the expectation will be from golfers that the tool is used.
Excellent. Very good. Other questions? I hope everyone got something out of this, picked up something here and there. We'll hang on here for another couple minutes. We'll remind everybody again, thank you. I will send out the copy of the slides to everyone after, as well as a form for any CPGA Pro that was online this morning. Thanks for taking your time. I know you guys are busy. The ladies are busy. I'll send out a form to fill out for the PDR points. Always as reminders, our main office is 910-673-1000. Our member services department, Kevin and myself and Anna Catherine, can be reached at 910-687-4040, or the GAS Golf Association Services, the Carolinas, at carolinasgolf.org. And then our website's carolinasgolf.org, and for South Carolina, scgolf.org and WSCGA.org. And always, there's tons of resources at usga.org. If you go to usga.org, there's a menu at the top. I choose playing and then handicapping home. Lots of resources there. And always reach out anytime with questions on handicap allowances and running your event and that sort of thing. Again, thanks for taking your time. We'll hang out here for just another minute or two.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Anyway, all right. Well, with that, we can wrap it up. Thanks again. Appreciate all your time. And again, hope you got something out of this, and have a great day. Reach out anytime with questions. Enjoy the nice weather.